9 Facts You Didn't Know About William the Conqueror and the Norman Conquest. 1. Every major church in England was rebuilt as a result of the Norman Conquest. The Anglo-Saxons were not recognized for their stone construction, and throughout the first half of the 11th century, they had not adopted the new architectural style known as Romanesque, which had grown popular on the continent. The only large Romanesque church in England prior to 1066 was Edward the Confessor's new abbey at Westminster, which was still under construction at the time of the king's death on January 5 that year. During William the Conqueror's reign, Normandy underwent a church-building boom, with dozens of new abbeys being erected and old cathedrals being rebuilt. This revolution was extended to England after the conquest, commencing with the rebuilding of Canterbury Cathedral in 1070. In the 11th century, England had 15 cathedrals. 9 of them had been repaired by the time William died in 1087, and the remaining 6 had been reconstructed by the time his son Henry I died in 1135. Every big abbey was in the same boat. It was the single most significant change in English religious architecture. 2. The Norman Conquest introduced castles to Britain. Castles were invented in France, and the first examples were built along the Loire Valley at the turn of the millennium. There were several in Normandy before 1066, but just a few in England, built by French associates of the English monarch, Edward the Confessor, in the preceding generation. All of it altered after the Norman Conquest. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle for 1066 sobbed, "They constructed fortresses far and wide, tormenting the sad people." Around 500 castles had been built across England and Wales by the time William died in 1087. The majority were made of earth and wood, but in London, Colchester, and Chepstow, work on massive stone towers had begun. 3. The Battle of Hastings was fought at Battle, near Hastings. This may seem self-evident, but considering the different options that have received public attention in recent years, it is worth emphasizing again. It's notoriously difficult to establish the precise location of medieval wars. People frequently believe that archaeology can solve their problems, although this is rarely true. Battlefields were scavenged of goods and dead were taken away to be buried in grave holes as metal rusted and wood rotted. The Battle of Falkirk, which took place in 1298 between Edward I and William Wallace, was one of the greatest battles in medieval Britain, with about 30,000 troops on the English side alone, but not a single arrowhead has ever been discovered. Fortunately, the evidence for battle is well founded, as William constructed an abbey to mark the location, which still stands today. The myth that he did this was not contrived by the monks of Battle in the late 12th century, as conspiracy theorists claim, but dates back to the time of the conqueror himself. On the precise location where God awarded him the victory, he commanded a large abbey to be built, the contemporary Anglo-Saxon Chronicle writes in its obituary of William. 4. More than 100,000 people died as a result of the Norman Conquest. The exact strength of both sides' armies at Hastings is uncertain, but neither is estimated to have numbered more than 10,000 soldiers. Many people died in the fight, but thousands more died in the years afterward as English resistance led to Norman repression. After a joint English uprising and Danish invasion in the winter of 1069–70, William laid waste to England north of the Humber, destroying crops and livestock to the point where the country could no longer support human life. Famine ensued, with 100,000 people dying as a result, according to a later chronicler. According to modern study of the statistics in Doomsday Book, a population decline of this magnitude did occur. 5. The Normans introduced chivalry to Britain. While William and the Normans were ruthless in battle, they were more civilized in politics. Prior to 1066, the English political elite had a history of assassinating political opponents, which they would repeat in the later Middle Ages. However, for more than 2 centuries following the conquest, chivalry reigned supreme, and political assassination was outlawed. The Anglo-Saxon chronicles summarized the positive aspects of William's reign by saying, "No man ventured to slay another, no matter what harm he had done him." The only earl executed following the Norman conquest was Waltheof of Northumbria, who was decapitated in 1076. The next earl to be executed in England was in 1306, some 230 years later. 6. William banned the English slave trade. Slaves made up at least 10% of the population in pre-conquest England, and maybe as much as 30%. Slaves were viewed as human chattels, and their masters could sell, beat, and mark them as they saw fit. Killing a slave was a sin, but not a crime. The Norman conquest hastened the system's downfall. William outlawed the slave trade and, in some circumstances, emancipated slaves, resulting in a 25% reduction in the number of slaves by the conclusion of his reign. Slavery was abolished in England by the early 12th century. In the 1130s, Lawrence of Durham said, after England had begun to have Norman lords, the English no longer endured from strangers what they had experienced at their own hands. In this sense, they found foreigners treated them better than they had treated themselves. 7. Both William and his queen, Matilda, were of normal height. It is still widely believed that William was extremely tall and that his wife, Matilda, was unusually small. There is no evidence to back up either claim, and enough to refute it. William's height was only rated as appropriate by his contemporaries, who classified him as powerful. In Matilda's instance, they merely stated that she was lovely and said nothing about her height. Both William and Matilda were buried in Caen, he in the Abbey of Saint Etienne, which he founded in 1063, and she in the Nunnery of Holy Trinity, which she founded in 1059. Only parts of their skeletons survive from their tombs, which were destroyed in the 16th century, in William's case, a solitary bone. French archaeologists inspected the remains in 1959, and it was generally stated that Matilda was a little 127 centimeters 4 feet 2 inches and William was a muscular 178 centimeters 5 feet 10 inches. Broadly, but inaccurately. In 1959, specialists determined that Matilda was 152 centimeters 5 tall, only 5 centimeters shorter than the normal medieval adult female, a height that, according to royal gynecologist Sir Jack Dewhurst, was far more suitable with her 9 healthy pregnancies. Meanwhile, in 1983, William's single remaining thigh bone was re-examined, and his height was estimated to be 173 centimeters, just 2 centimeters higher than the average medieval adult male. 8. William's reign began and ended with inglorious scenes. William's coronation as King of England at Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day, 1066 was a high point in his career, but things did not proceed as planned. The Normans were surrounded by thousands of unhappy Englishmen from nearby London, thus the event took place in a tense setting. When the crowd yelled their approval of William's authority, the Normans on guard outside the church mistook the clamor for treachery and set fire to the surrounding buildings, forcing those inside to flee or join in the looting. William's death in 1087 was marred by similar unpleasant circumstances. He died at the Priory of Saint Gervais, near Rouen, and his attendants robbed his belongings and left his body nearly bare as soon as he died. His body was eventually transported by boat to Caen for burial, but a fire broke out as he was being escorted through the town, causing mayhem. An enraged heckler disrupted his funeral at St. Stephen's Abbey, claiming that the church had been built on his father's property without compensation. When the monks tried to force the issue, William's distended bowels erupted, filling the abbey with such a stink that everyone but the presiding clergy fled.